Welcome to Mastermind Minutes, the podcast that focuses on the franchise industry. We'll cover topics that are important to franchisees as well as franchisors and share interesting insights that will help you build your business. We have one guest, we ask one question, and we do this in minutes, not hours. Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Mastermind Minutes. My name is Gary Occhiogrosso. I am the founder and managing partner of Franchise Growth Solutions and the publisher for FranchiseMoneymaker.com. If you're joining us for the first time, Mastermind Minutes is a very simple concept. We have one guest, we ask one question, and we do this in minutes, not hours, to get to an answer. And we realize that may not be enough time to actually dig down into it. So at the end of the program, we will certainly give you contact information. So if you feel like reaching out to our guest, you certainly can do that. And today it's my honor to have Scott Snyder on. And Scott is the CEO of Badass Coffee of Hawaii and has more than 35 years of experience as a business owner, executive, award-winning marketing strategist, and a business consultant. Scott has a consistent track record of transforming early-stage brands and really into categories where they become contenders. And that's really important. And also what we'll be talking about today is reinventing existing brands to realize new levels of success. Outside of coffee, Scott is an avid sailboat racer. I'd love to know more about that, Scott, and also enjoys skiing with his wife in Colorado. And Scott, I'm very glad that you're here today. We had the serendipitous moment of meeting at the same roundtable that you were conducting at IFA a couple of weeks, and here we are. So I'm very happy that you're here. Tell us a little bit more about Scott, and tell us a little bit more about Badass Coffee of Hawaii before we get into the question.
Great. Well, aloha, Gary. Thanks for bringing me on today. Yeah, Badass Coffee of Hawaii is a 34-year-old brand, started in 1989, and I came onto the brand as a consultant actually in 2017. Brought in to help them kind of take a look at the organization and help them understand why they hadn't been able to sell a franchise since 2008, so nearly 10 years at that point. And you know, the short story is the brand was on its way out. They were losing. They had in their 28-year history to that point, the brand had never been more than 36, 38 stores. But there was a constant influx of new stores coming in and then stores very quickly closing. And so, and then after the recession in 2008, they really struggled. And what I immediately saw in the brand was an amazing opportunity, but also a pretty significant gap. This brand, the name itself, I mean, who doesn't like a name like Badass Coffee of Hawaii? And it really is all about the donkeys, the donkeys, the asses that brought the coffee down the steep slopes, steep volcanic slopes of the Big Island of Hawaii, were the namesake and the inspiration for this brand. It's a big part of actually our history, the brand's history, but really the coffee history of coffee in Hawaii, and donkeys are used all over the world. But what I saw was a great brand name, was really blown away by some early research about just what sort of brand recognition and memory people have of the brand, and very fond memories too. Great name, great coffee. So those are two of the most important legs of that three-legged stool. But the third leg of that stool was really about the infrastructure, the people, the process, the systems, the technology, the innovation, all those things that provide sustainable support and sustainable success for franchisees. And as a franchisor, that's our obligation. That's our half of the deal. But as a franchisee, you look for that in a potential franchise relationship. That's something that's important to you. So there was it wasn't just that leg of the stool was broken. It was missing altogether. There was none of that. And so my consulting arrangement quickly turned into something else, which was an interest to buy the brand. Put together a group of investors, and in 2019 we acquired the assets of the brand, all the marks, all the recipes, and the existing franchise agreements, which at that point were about 18 stores. We set out to relaunch this brand, right? And really zero in on those unique, ownable truths that only this brand had that would enable them to compete in a very competitive coffee market. Not to mention the franchise market within the coffee segment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In 2020, we launched the new brand, the new logo, the new identity, new packaging, and the new store design. The last of those announcements being made on Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020, which, as we all remember, was kind of the beginning of the end for the year that was COVID. So our timing wasn't great,
Right.
but that was really the beginning.
I hear you.
Where we've gone from there as a brand has been, we've built that infrastructure. We brought in the right people, and I think that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. But today, where the brand stands is we further shrunk the brand down to about 12 locations. We have built that infrastructure. It's been very time consuming. It's been a little expensive, but where we are today is we've just opened up our 34th store. We're getting ready to open another one here in about 3 weeks. We have 110 stores that are in the pipeline that are all in various stages of development. And so the future is bright for Badass Coffee and having a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think before the program, I mentioned to you, I had a similar role, and it's always fun when you sort of look at it, you find the nuggets, so to speak, and you build upon that. But the amazing thing there is you took it over, it had 18, you scaled it down to 12. You did what you needed to do, and then now you're at, I believe you said 34, so you've more than doubled, and you've got over 100 in the pipeline. So that's beautiful. So the question really then is how, because you've got a heritage brand on your hands for sure. I mean, Badass Coffee of Hawaii, I think I mentioned to you when we were at IFA that I had been in one of your units probably 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, and really dug it. But there were none up here in New York when I got back up to New York. So the question then really is, how do you balance the brand heritage with the innovation that you want to bring to it in order to drive it as a successful brand in this day and age? So you take 28 years of heritage, now you've got to do what you need to do and innovate and bring it into today. How do you manage to balance all of that?
It's a great question. You got to start at the beginning, right? You got to break it all down. And in my experience, whether we're relaunching a brand or just trying to improve upon a brand, the first thing that we did was we did basically a brand summit, where it was a brand audit, really kind of a cultural diagnostic to understand what's really behind the brand. And it really kind of comes down to, what are we and what are we not as a brand, and who are our customers and who are they not as a brand, and really zeroing in on those unique and ownable truths that only this brand can stand behind. There can only be one Coca-Cola, right? Being everything like Coca-Cola actually is a strategy, and the very best you can be in that strategy is number two. And when you're Coca-Cola size, that could be a pretty successful strategy. But for most brands in most categories, it's a matter of what differentiates you from everyone else. And with our Hawaiian heritage, this brand was started on the Big Island in 1989. The first 16 locations were on the islands of Hawaii. By the time it was sold in 1995 and began to actually franchise, those quickly reduced. And when I came into the brand, there was only 2 stores in Hawaii, and one of them unfortunately burned to the ground last summer during the fires, which was just tragic. But when we did that brand audit, that cultural diagnostic, really what we arrived at was our 3 brand pillars were, number one, our Hawaiian heritage. So leaning even further into that Hawaiian heritage. So what does aloha mean, and how does that represent itself as a consumer experience? How does that represent itself in terms of the relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee, then the franchisee and their customers? So the spirit of aloha. So, generosity, kindness, empathy, community involvement. Those are all things that are part of Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian heritage, and therefore critical, right? Critical to what we were going to establish. Because when you're Badass Coffee of Hawaii, you're not just another coffee shop. You're representing that Hawaiian heritage as well. Ohana, the whole notion of family, that really resonates in a franchisor franchisee relationship, right? Treat each other like family. I come from a big Catholic family myself. I've got some brothers and sisters that I like a little bit more than others, but at the end of the day, I know that they've got my back, and I've got theirs. And that's kind of that same relationship between the franchisor and franchisee. So leaning into the Hawaiian heritage, and then obviously our Hawaiian coffee. So being experts in Hawaiian coffee specifically. And then the last one, our name is about these donkeys, the donkeys that those hardworking donkeys that were stubborn but reliable, made a lot of noise, but they were committed to doing the heavy lifting of bringing that coffee down. And truth be told, when we went into this, I kind of wondered, boy, badass coffee of Hawaii. They were, the badass was big. Hawaii was the smallest thing. And I just said, man, I wonder if those should be kind of reversed. Well, what came out of that brand exercise was, no, actually, we need to lean even more into that, right? We're going to tell our story. We always lead with the legend and how the donkeys were used. But you don't have to listen very far or listen very long to hear the term badass and how people are referred to as being badass, or that's really badass, or that guy over there, he's a badass, watch out for him, and it's not just, it's not the worst version of that, it's the best version of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The single parent who gets up every morning and makes breakfast for their kids and walks them down to the bus stop, that's pretty badass, right? People who
Absolutely.
People go out in the community and do great things every day. They ask for nothing in return. That's really badass, right? And so we've really embraced the heritage of this brand, which is, yes, it's about the donkeys, but we know that there's another meaning to that. And that's something that differentiates us too. So the three brand pillars being our Hawaiian heritage, our Hawaiian coffee expertise, and fueling that inner badass in all of us. So that became kind of the cultural diagnostic output. And from there, with that as kind of a baseline, everything, all of our planning in terms of, the infrastructure that we were going to build, the way that we began to communicate with our franchisees, the promises that we made, and then honoring those promises, that's all about being a cultural champion, right? And it started with me as the CEO, and as we began to build our team of subject matter experts, people who've, in my terms, been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, someone who's done this before in the marketing side, someone who's built a franchise system before on the operations side, someone who's been able to grow a brand with development and distribution. We brought a team of people that not only had the subject matter expertise, but were also a great cultural fit for aloha, for family, for putting in the hard work, selfishly, right, as a team, as a family, to produce something really unique and something really interesting in this space.
Mhm. Well, okay, so that's a great sort of executive summary um, on it, but there's a lot to unpack. I get it about the Hawaiian heritage, the coffee, the sense of family, the badass donkeys, but I really connected with your sort of connecting the badass donkeys to people in terms of what they do every day, because we all know that a business, franchised or otherwise, always needs to be engaged in the community. And when you talk about people who are badass in their community, whether it's, the parent who's getting up every day, cooking breakfast, taking their kids to the bus stop, or maybe somebody who's working out in the community for no pay, That is
Right.
that is very badass. From a nuts and bolts point of view, just walk me through the when you took over the brand, the timeline for the information you just relayed to us. From there to the time someone in the organization felt, okay, we're ready to offer franchises again. We've got our act together. We know where we want to go with this. What sort of timeline was that from your takeover to exploring the brand, modifying it, doing what you needed to do to actual relaunch date, for the lack of a better word?
Sure, sure. We closed the transaction for the acquisition in July of 2019. We completed this brand diagnostic, this cultural diagnostic in December of 2019, and built the brand, the packaging, and the interior store design 3 months later, and launched that, like I said, in March of 2020. COVID hit, which immediately kind of, while we're continuing to plow forward on the planning for building that infrastructure, it really did. It was a curse and a blessing all at the same time, because it really allowed us to have the first opportunity to demonstrate what Ohana and what Aloha was all about with our franchisees. The most important thing for us was to make sure that they had a way to continue to operate. They're all independent business owners. Again, this was a brand that had not supported them for years. They were, they were like scorned lovers, right?
Yep, yep, I hear you.
We had a lot of trust to build, and we very quickly, again, using the experience and the networks of people that we had, came up with solutions where there was no technology in. We had 5 different POS systems. We had no online ordering. We had no
Ooh,
mobile app.
oh boy.
We had a lot of things to do, but we very quickly created solutions, implemented them. Uh, None of our stores closed down during those initial 3 or 4 months. While, like everyone else, we took a major hit in revenue, about 73%. Within 2 months, we were on our way back up. Within 3.5 months, we were back to pre-COVID levels, and we actually ended that year 43% higher in sales for the year than the prior year for the company, and that was with that big dip. So, but what that did for us is it enabled us to really demonstrate that we were committed to them and that we were working on their behalf. Their success was our success, and it's really where we coined, which is also part of our culture, we are a franchise first company, right? So because this is relevant to the next part of this, right? You said, what was the timeline for building the rest of that? When, in the absence of any infrastructure, right, everything is a priority. So how do you prioritize?
Right.
Well, the way that we prioritize the priorities was, if it was in the best interest of the franchise first, right, that was the choice over something that was maybe more structure for us. What was going to benefit the franchisee first? What was going to give them the greatest opportunity to make more money, to put more money into their pocket to improve their business? Those were the kinds of choices that we made. So that was our COVID story. But I would say we put enough of a story together by the fall of 2020 to where our vision for what we were going to do, what we were building, providing evidence that was in progress, we were able to sell our first franchise in November of 2020.
Great. Great.
Uh,
So
and
6
then
months to put it together, another 3 months for the design. I
another,
agree with you.
yeah,
Focused on your franchisee during COVID. COVID, you use the term blessing and a curse. I'm on board with you, because it forced us to take a step back and look at things that, in the normal whirlwind that was going on prior to COVID, we may not have had the time to do. But during COVID, I mean, we launched a couple brands in COVID that are incredibly successful because we really had nothing but time to look at them. So I think it's wonderful in terms of sort of winning your franchisees back over, because you can't go forward without your franchisees being happy.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think Gary, a lot of other brands stopped for a period of time, or they pulled way back for a period of time. Again, in the absence of any real infrastructure, or for us, it wasn't the franchisees that we acquired were basically operating their business however they could to survive,
right.
because the predecessor didn't have a lot of support. So it really wasn't about kind of pulling back the reins on anything. We hadn't even got to that point yet. For
Yeah.
us, it's more about how do we keep them standing up. And so while a lot of the rest of the world and a lot of the other players in this space were trying to figure out how to adapt to what they had, we were still moving forward. All the wheels were
Hmm.
turning. We were building that infrastructure, and like you said, when you can start from the very beginning, and that's what's so unique about this brand. I mean, we call it a 33-year-old startup, right? I mean,
Right.
basically the only thing that we kept, was the name and the product. The product was outstanding. The name is memorable, right? But we built everything from scratch, and that was also part of the attraction for the team that we were able to hire. How often do you get that opportunity where you have a functioning business that you can write a new script, right? It was a blank canvas. We had a logo in one corner, we had a great product in the other corner, and we all had an opportunity to bring the best practices, all of our experiences together and say, if you could build the perfect franchise, what would that look like? Now let's go build that.
Yeah. Well, and to do that during a pandemic, I would have to say, is pretty badass. I mean, I couldn't resist, I have to say. So now you're at November 2020. What sort of, again, just kind of looking into my experience, my background, I recall when we would take over a heritage brand, sometimes the franchisees were so neglected. And you mentioned that they were in survival mode, as I call it. You didn't use that word. I use that term a lot. But we found that the franchisees, when we would take over the company, sometimes, and I guess to use a sort of a visual, if I'm a dog lover, I've raised German shepherds for the last 40 years. Sometimes we would rescue a German shepherd and you would go to pet it and it would flinch. And it would flinch because whoever raised it hit it.
Mm-hmm.
And we would almost get the same reaction sometimes from franchisees. You'd go to love them and try to help them, and they'd flinch. So I'm curious, what sort of flinching or resistance did you get from franchisees, if any, or did they sort of welcome you with open arms and go, "Oh, the cavalry is here"?
It wasn't the latter. I can.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just put that in for a little balance. Okay.
I appreciate that. No, one of the first things I did as a consultant actually was I called every single franchisee and had a very real conversation, and it was an interesting experience because I wasn't the CEO, I wasn't the owner, I wasn't part of the staff, and I think that gave everybody free license to say whatever they wanted, and man, did they unload, right?
Wow.
And that was good. It was really good. Number one, it was good for them to get it out. Number two, it was good for me to understand, where what their frame of reference was. I followed that up then with a visit to every store. And that was met with a lot of surprise and a little bit of delight, which was, do you realize you're the first person from that staff and you're not actually an employee?
Right.
Visit us since we've opened our store. And I said, well, how long ago was that? Well, that was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So even by, even just through communication and by continuing to number one, ask for, solicit their feedback, their input, their honesty. Just listening is a great place to start. But from there, then demonstrating a commitment like we did through COVID, demonstrating a commitment to really get to know them, create a relationship with them by visiting them, and actually visited every store twice in that first year. Was about building trust. And so, yes, change is hard. Change is hard. You go first. There's always going to be resistance to change. But you have to have trust in order to at least have a frame of reference that will be heard, right? And in our case, the COVID gave kind of the first example of, wow, maybe these guys actually do have my best interests at heart. And then beginning through that summer of 2020 and And really, we're still building infrastructure today, but every infrastructure piece that we've built, yes, there's been change. They have absorbed a lot of change in the last 4 years, but they've also seen, 2, 3, 4 times growth in their stores where they had never had any growth before, ever. In fact, they were going the other direction. So we've earned trust. Doesn't mean that every change has just gone off swimmingly. There's still resistance to change. But sometimes all it takes is a matter of kind of going back and saying, I understand your position. Look where you've come. Look where you've come so far. Look how you're managing your business differently today than you were before. And look how much better off you are. Look how much more revenue you're driving, or how many more opportunities you're creating for your employees, because you have the ability to do that now, right? You're expanding your business. We've got the best, honestly, the best example was, of franchisees who, it wasn't just selling new franchisees. We had existing franchisees who had been with the brand for, 15, 16 years, who are now buying and building more locations.
That touche. That underscores everything.
So, but it really is. There's a lot of change, and change is hard. Communication is critical. Having your, when you have so much change going on, it's important that you be really organized. We haven't always been the best with communication. In full transparency, that's something we continue to work at. But it is about building trust, communicating, giving them plenty of opportunity to respond and react, because you learn a lot from that, and you modify your approach to address that. But it's coming along. It really is.
And that really is, in my opinion, the way to do it. I know it takes a little longer and it's a lot more work, but the foundation there is just it's critical and it's set solid. So you awarded your first new franchise in November 2020. It is now springtime of 2024. You've got 34 operating units, which is an increase from the 12. You've got, I believe you said 110 or so in the pipeline. How did you get from November 2020 to March of 2024 with those sorts of results? What were the steps there?
Again, a lot of it was sharing the vision. And I meant it earlier. We are still building that infrastructure. The kind of the running was, we were building the car while we were driving it. And our franchisees knew that, but for potential franchisees that were looking at what we were doing, it's exciting, right? I mean, it's exciting to see a brand launched with a different attitude, with a different approach. And as they started calling our legacy franchisees, the OGs, as I call them, to hear those folks say, yeah, we were about ready to go under, or we'd never been loved as a franchisee for years, and this is really different. It's hard, but it's really different, and it's working. So we got a lot of help from our franchisees. We got a lot of help from the media, and from folks who took an interest in what we were doing and how we were doing it, and having the opportunity to, speak on programs like this, and just give a glimpse into, all the hard work that we're doing, all helped a lot. And having a name like Badass Coffee of Hawaii, again, doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. But it is fun. And I think that's been the biggest opportunity. But I think having that vision for, having a very clear and aligned vision. So whether you talk to me, or whether you talk to, Chris Ruskowski, my chief marketing officer, or Sue Sauer, my chief operations officer on franchise, you will hear the exact same thing. And it's not just we've all memorized the script. I mean, we live it, we breathe it. Alignment at the senior level of the organization is critical, right?
Absolutely.
There can't be any chinks in the armor there. And it, I had a vision for what I thought this could be. That vision is 20 times better today because of the insight and experience from the team that we've assembled. Mm-hmm. And that goes down to the next layer and the next layer. And now you start to see the franchisees that have come in who've been really attracted to that and really drawn to what we're doing. And they share that same passion, that same excitement. They bring a different level of business acumen and experience and prior franchise experience, and have been part of fast growth brands in the past. And that also, your culture is really the sum of the parts, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It may have started with my vision, but the culture is really now a reflection of everyone that's in the organization. That's really powerful.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree with you more. The vision, the mission slash purpose, and the culture are really what drive great brands. Yes, you need to have a good product, but you could have the greatest product in the world, but if you don't have a purpose, if you have no vision, if your culture is toxic, it's going nowhere. So I commend you on that, and think it's just terrific. We're coming sort of down to the end here. Any last insight you want to share with the audience who might be a franchisor that's struggling, or might be someone who's a franchisee or a wannabe franchisee thinking about a brand? Anything you want to share with us here at the end?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I would say if you're a if you're a franchisor, and as you said earlier, Gary, COVID gave us a reason to go back and kind of start from scratch, or at least take a look at what we're doing, and reanalyze everything, right? Get back to the basics. What is it that you do? What is it that separates you from everyone else? What's your unique and ownable truth? And rebuild your brand around that, or improve your brand on that. Take a look at, are we really doing the best job as franchisors of really emphasizing that, or building a business around that, making that something that converts into real dollars and cents into the pockets of our franchisees? What are we doing to support them to do more of that, right? And on the franchisee side, I think I think there's a reason why you pick franchising versus something else, right? I mean, they're corporate brands, and I've probably worked with 150 brands in my career, a lot of them in the restaurant space, and advised them and worked with them on these very sorts of issues. And I'll tell you what, I'll take a franchise brand over a corporate brand 7 days a week and twice on Sunday, because at the end of the day, what really differentiates is that business owner, that person who is the hometown hero, is a part of that community, who is a reflection of that brand, but also community. You can't underestimate the impact that a franchisee has, right? So why do we buy into a franchise? Well, we want to buy into a franchise because they're doing all the they're doing the brand is known, they've got systems in place, it's a business in the box. Well, what's the special sauce? Well, the special sauce is you as
Right.
the franchisee, right? So my advice to franchisees is find, as you're looking for the brands that are of interest to you, which one of those brands really supports you in that manner, gives you all the tools, right? But is going to be a great partner with you, is going to share your passion for growing your business, is going to support you in making that business a critical part of that community, right? And selfishly, I think coffee shops are always kind of the center of the community. It's where we gather, it's where decisions are made, it's where deals are made, it's where relationships are formed. And so I think we've got kind of a unique stronghold on that. But regardless of the business, having a franchisor that's going to work with you and support you to be a hometown hero, that's the brand you want to work with.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. If someone wants to reach out to you or reach out to Badass Coffee of Hawaii to get more information, what's the best way to do it? And we'll put that into the podcast, and we'll have a link. So what is the best way to get to you or to the brand?
Terrific. Yeah, badasscoffee.com is our main brand site. You'll learn everything about the brand itself. And then Badass Coffee
Mhm.
Franchise.com if you have any inquiries about joining our Ohana.
Okay, great. Well, Scott, thank you so much for being with us today. Insights invaluable. Absolutely terrific to learn about the brand. Hope to see it up here in the Northeast at some point. Uh, okay, good. That's good to know. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you again soon.
Mahalo, Gary. Aloha, everyone.